Let's then, Mr. Tyagarajan, come to the second issue I want to discuss with you today, delimitation. The Chief Minister has called this a sword hanging over the head of South India. He's called an all-party meeting on this issue on the 5th, which is in 2 days' time. Can you start by explaining to the audience, who may not be aware of the fine details, what is the Chief Minister's key concern about delimitation?
Well, we should start actually again with proper historical perspective, right? In any democracy, on a regular basis, you're supposed to do two things. One is keep taking a census to find out who lives where people have shifted, etc. And two is allocate representatives to the parliament, to the assembly, to the local council of the city or the village based on the population, because equal representation is a profound principle of democracy. This is the basis for all these discussions. Now, we start in 1951 after the adoption of the Constitution, 52 first election. And from 52 till about the 70s, what happened every 10 years was a new census was taken. And once a new census was taken, the seats for parliament in particular, but also all the other levels, were redistricted to ensure somewhat equitable representation, the same number of people per MP, the same number of people per MLA, and so forth. What happened in the 1970s was that the population growth was growing so rapidly, was increasing so rapidly for a resource-constrained country that the then government decided, rightly so, that population control was one of the primary objectives for development and poverty alleviation. Therefore, they brought in a whole lot of schemes. You may remember, you and I may be the same vintage of the notion of V2 hours to then eventually V2 hours one, etc. Family planning came out in a big way. So population reduction was considered the number one goal to try and increase prosperity and reduce poverty. In that effort, states that were doing relatively well then raised a concern to the union government, said, if we actually curtail our populations, because the outcome of population growth control or rate control was widely varying between states, even back in the 70s and even today. For example, the total fertility rate for a woman in the south of India is probably about 1.8 or 1.9. And in the north is about 3.1 or something. So it's actually quite a big gap even today. It was true even then. So they went to the union government and said, if we do what the government says is our national objective, and if you do redistricting every 10 years, what's going to happen is those of us who restrict our population growth are going to become proportionally less represented in the parliament. Therefore, give us a solution where by being patriots and following the national ambition, we are not losing representation. So in this 42nd amendment, the same amendment that made these subjects, health, education, and all move from the state list to the concurrent list, a resolution was passed that redistricting shall be frozen for 25 years. From 1976 to 2001, there will be no redistricting of parliamentary seats based on census, because we don't want to penalize those states that are actually achieving the objective of population reduction. Now, fast forward to 2021. In 2001, which was the end of this first, 2001, the government of India had to do one of two things, or the Parliament of India had to do one of two things. Either let it expire and do a redistricting after the 2001 census, or say that still it was in the national interest and therefore states that reduce their population should not be penalized. And therefore, though the 76 amendment was brought by Tirumati Indira Gandhi and her government, then the Congress government, the 2001 government, led by Thiru Vajpayee at the time, brought another constitutional amendment, the 84th constitutional amendment, that said this freeze on redistricting shall extend for another 25 years till 2026. So, since 1976, the number of parliamentary seats per state have stayed frozen. In the meantime, because of this disparity I've told you about the birth rates, the population in states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar have grown much faster than the population in states like Tamil Nadu or Kerala. So at this point today, you effectively have unequal representation. That is to say, the average MP in Tamil Nadu probably represents somewhere less than 2 million people, and the average MP in Uttar Pradesh probably represents more than 2.5, closer to 3 million people. So that's the disparity that we now have that is going to be relevant or be exposed or be the basis should this redistricting limitation of freeze expire in a year from now.
I
That's the
understand.
basis.
The Chief Minister has claimed that if delimitation were to happen in 2026, the number of seats that Tamil Nadu has in the Lok Sabha, I'm excluding Pondicherry, would shrink from 39 to 31. That's a very substantial 20% diminution. Let me first ask you, how confident he is of this figure 31?
I guess it's as confident as anybody can be with only one caveat, because by rights, there should have been a 2021 census. After 2011, there has been no census. This current government, which is in its third term, has chosen not to run the census, only now announced it and is starting to gear up for it. So if there is any discrepancy in this number, it is purely based on the fact that everybody has to use the 2011 census and project forward. Normally, in a country like ours, I have often recommended that the census should not even be once every 10 years. It should be once in 3 or 5 years because it's changing so dramatically, so dynamically, that other countries which do it very frequently, like Australia does it almost every 3 years, that we should do it much more frequently. But that's a different issue. Now we don't have a census for 14 years from 2011. So when we project numbers, we have to take 2011 and multiply it by all the available data, voter records, pension accounts, ration cards, public distribution systems, etc. So if there is any discrepancy, it is only a minor discrepancy based on everybody working off of projections. The general trend mathematically is not in dispute, right? It may be 30.98 or 31.62, I don't know. Those numbers, because all of us are working with approximations and projections, there hasn't been a census in recent years.
Now, the Times of India on the 27th of February did a set of calculations with a projection as a result. And I want to put that to you to ask you, how concerned are you if that actually turns out to be the truth? The Times of India has done this calculation, and I'll quote it. It says that at the moment, the 5 southern states have 129 out of 543 Lok Sabha seats, which is roughly 24% of the total. But in a Lok Sabha where the total number of seats is 790, the 5 southern states will only have 152 seats, which is just 19%. In other words, their share of seats will shrink from 24% to 19%, and simultaneously, Tamil Nadu's share will fall from 7.2 to 5.4. Now, that is a projection and calculation done by the Times of India, but if it turns out to be correct or close to correct, how concerned would you be?
I'm extremely concerned because if we continue on this path, either their number or my chief minister's number, which are very close to each other, is going to be the outcome. It's not in dispute, right? It's very clear that if you were to do redistricting, this is the number you're going to get. So now I have two great concerns. The first concern is, over the last 25 years of finance commissions, we have kept on seeing the net transfer of funds away from developed states to underdeveloped states keep on increasing. And what that should have done was make the underdeveloped states come up closer to the developed states. But it has not. We have kept seeing more and more money going and the gap keeping on widening. So the same ratio, 7.2, 5.4, rings a bell to me because at one point, Tamil Nadu was about 8% of the population, about 8% of the GDP, and got about 8% of the taxes, or 7% of the taxes. Today, we're less than 6% of the population, close to 10% of the GDP, and getting 4.1 or 4.2% of the taxes. So this lower payback, lower ratio allocation has already happened for 25 years. Now, if you tell me I'm also going to lose representation, of course, it's deeply alarming to me because India is the most centralized administrative model in the world, much more so than communist China, much more so than capitalist America. All the powers are concentrated in the union government. If at that union government, you say, Tamil Nadu in particular, but the southern states in general, we are going to lose representation. Already we are finding that we are the engine of tax and engine of growth, and our voices are not heard enough. They're trying to extort us by saying you have to learn Hindi, etc., which is antithetical to our performance. Now, if you say we are not even going to have representation, of course, it drives me into a panic. Why are you surprised about that?